Hey everybody, welcome to our On Pit Road Race Rewind this week for the Quicken Loans 400. I got it right this time, Dan, at Michigan International Speedway. I am Charlie Turner. He is Dan Beaver. Hey Dan, what's going on?
Just another beautiful day in Central Texas. Nothing to complain about.
Very good. I'm about, I don't know, 90 minutes or less south of the site of that race last Sunday, and it looks like we're going to get some storms here today, although it's kind of warm. That's okay. It was a perfect weather weekend at Michigan this past weekend. A little warm on Sunday. Probably slowed the speeds down a little bit, but it was a very fast weekend.
Yeah, Michigan's always it tends to be that way because of those long green flag runs too. It kind of compounds the speed and compounds the issues that drivers may or may not have.
Yeah, well, the big story, I guess, coming out of the race after the race end is that Jimmy Johnson, who was about a month ago almost given up for dead for 2014, wins his first time ever at Michigan International Speedway in a Cup car, third time in the last 4 weeks in the Cup Series, and his 69th career win. That's a pretty big story, and it's wearing on some people out there.
And the fifth consecutive win for Hendrick Motorsports.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
huge.
think that's making it worse, adding insult to injury.
Yeah, that, and it was just a dominant weekend for Chevys in general. The Hendrick Motors, in particular, I don't have this in front of me, but I think the Hendrick Motors were 7 of the top 10 finishing cars. There were a couple of Fords up there. The two Penske cars managed to make a decent showing um, up into the top 15 for Ford, but that was it. Keselowski was the only one that really uh, maybe put a little bit of worry into Johnson and the Chevy runners.
Yeah, they were by far the class of the field. Those three: Johnson, Harvick, Keselowski. Might throw Gordon in there early, but
Yeah,
once he got back in traffic and restarts, his Achilles heel kind of took him out of contention.
yeah. His
Still,
actually he actually displayed his pathetic nature in restarts in this race. It was obvious just going backwards right from the flag.
well, the first couple of the start and the first couple of restarts, he managed to hold serve okay while he was on the front row and while he was right, and he got some practice with those early cautions. But as soon as he gets in dirty air, as soon as he gets other drivers around him, he just seems to have lost that aggression that it's going to take to get past a couple of cars.
In the post qualifying interview, I was in the media center, and of course they interviewed Kevin Harvick and interviewed Casey Kane, interviewed Jeff Gordon. Gordon was the one when asked about the speed. He acknowledged the cars are fast, um, but he really kind of focused on and sounded almost worried about how the car would handle in traffic. He says once you get back, he says you got great grip when you're in clean air. As soon as you get into any kind of traffic, the grip goes totally away. And maybe that's what's happening on those restarts. When he gets a little bit mixed up with dirty air, he just goes backwards.
Yeah. The Brian Vickers incident early, the Kyle Larson incident early, I think that bore out what he was saying. And the good thing about Gordon is he's got enough experience, he's got enough longevity in the sport that he's not going to make stupid mistakes. While the other guys around him are going hell for leather, he's always going to look worse on restarts unless they crash. And they will crash from time to time. And it's just going to happen when you race that far, that close to the edge or over your head. And Gordon doesn't seem to be willing to race right at the ragged edge on restarts. And I
No, I
think
would
that's
agree with you. I don't think he's willing to race at the ragged edge almost anywhere anymore. It seems to me that's one of Steve's theories that once you either end up on your head or you have a kid, end up on your lid or have a kid, I think is the way Steve puts it. It takes the edge off, and it seems to me like he may be right when it comes to Gordon.
well, there can be a lot of tentative drivers out there if it's the kid thing because
Yeah, there were a lot of kids. We took a lot of
a
pictures.
bunch of kids.
A lot of pictures of kids. In fact, One drive I'm a little bit surprised when you mentioned the guys to beat at Michigan this weekend. You didn't mention Kevin Harvick. Harvick was the fast guy all weekend. I mean, there was nobody as fast as that number 4 car in almost any set of conditions where there wasn't a big field of traffic around him. He set a new all-time qualifying record at Michigan Speedway, 205 plus miles an hour. Fastest qualifying time on an oval track since Bill Elliott ran 212 at Talladega in 1987, I think, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to give a shout out to you. Last week on the On Pit Row show and on the Fantasy show, I think you said that Harvick would probably be the guy to beat this weekend unless he has an issue and the team screws up, and the team screwed up.
Yeah, the team screwed up, and it's probably what kept him from winning.
Mm-hmm.
And one reason that he was so acerbic in post-race.
He was pissed.
He probably should have won if they hadn't gotten off on strategy, and you just never know. Michigan has got so many different things that can play out at the end. It's prone to those green flag runs at the end. I think the other pleasant surprise, which I have to point out I also called, was Paul Menard.
Yes.
His fourth place finish wasn't entirely unforeseen, and I think he made a good, if you go back to the fantasy stuff, he certainly made a good fantasy dark horse. But I think he made a good dark horse overall. And I think that'll continue.
Had a good weekend overall because he also won the nationwide race on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. I think that'll continue on the unrestricted intermediate speedways for a little bit. I'd keep an eye on him in a couple of weeks when we get to Kentucky. Definitely when we get back to Michigan. He could be a pleasant surprise a couple more times.
Well, it definitely looks like, at least on these fast tracks, that the Hendrick-powered Chevrolets have an advantage of some kind. And Brad Keselowski, in his post-race interview, talked about that a little bit and was asked if there was anything that Penske thought Penske could do or that Ford could do to compensate for that going forward. And Keselowski's comment was, no, pretty much we've got what we've got. We know where we are. They know where they are. From here on out, they're going to have more horsepower than we are. So we have to do something different. So this could be interesting, what shakes out going forward. I know this is a race rewind, and we don't necessarily want to talk about what happens down the road, but there's some significance there that Keselowski, who seems to be now the lead Ford driver in the field, doesn't think they can catch the Chevys.
Yeah, and I think Keselowski and Logano as a pair, you had Logano coming across in the top 10 as well,
right?
And running strong at stages of the race. So they certainly seem to have, if they figured it out the best, and the best they can do is hover around the 5th place mark, it's going to make a long year for Ford. But Keselowski, I don't know that it's time to. There are tracks where raw horsepower isn't as important as it is on a 2-mile track. Even in the 1.5 mile tracks, you can compensate a lot by a strong handling car in the corners. You can compensate by strategy. And I think in his post-race, Keselowski talked about Paul Wolf's ability to make those good strategy calls. And that helped this team finish as well as they did last week. Chances are Chevy could have swept the entire top 10 if those guys hadn't got their strategy just right.
Yeah, we don't want to throw all the dirt on top of Ford because Toyota's kind of laying in the same hole, it looks like. Not much of a weekend for those cars.
Yeah, it looks like Clint Boyer was the only top 10 finisher, and then beyond that.
And that was a late race phenomena. He was not running up front all day.
Right. And then he's surrounded by more Chevy guys. So,
right, yeah.
But Chevy also has the lion's share of the field right now. I think they're 33%. No, they're more than that. They're 50% of the field is Chevy. So that's going to play into it also. That's going to play into it somewhat.
Yeah. Anything else surprise you? I know you mentioned, we talked a little bit before the show went on, that you thought it was a missed opportunity for the rookie drivers this weekend.
Oh, they looked so good for so long. Even with about 40 laps to go, they were all hovering around the 10th to 15th place mark, Looked like they were going to cross under the checkers in pretty much that same range. Then Dylan had the flat tire and speeding. Guess he had speeding a little bit earlier. Had the flat tire on the last pit stop. Allgaier kind of faded a little bit to finish just outside the top 15. And the super rookie, Larson, had a chance to win at certain stages. And everybody was going to blame it on the lost bumper cover.
The missing rear bumper cover.
Right, which brought to mind the Bobby Allison controversy at Daytona many, many years ago. I think it was Allison in Daytona, where he dropped the bumper, lost however many pounds that was, and just dominated the race for the rest of the time.
Well, Larson's impressive in a lot of ways on the track, but he's also impressive, I think, in his speaking, because he was interviewed at the end of the race as the top finishing rookie, and he was asked about that. Tony Stewart famously flipped him off during the race. He was asked about that too, and thought he handled that perfectly. He said, "That's just Tony being Tony. I don't really know what I did, but whatever." And then they asked him about, was the missing rear bumper cover the reason he was fast? And he said, it happened. The loss happened so early in the race, and I think it was like on fifth lap, maybe something like that. That he had that accident. And he says, we were fast all weekend with the bumper cover on there, so I think we would have been fast had it been there. He says, but it probably helped a little. So, I mean, he didn't deny that it helped some, but he didn't make a big deal out of it, and I thought he made his point really well.
Yeah, and at that point he had only had 2 green flag laps, the lap 1 and lap 5, I think.
5, I think it was, yeah.
And then he spun. So he only had 2 green flag laps and really hadn't gotten up to speed either time. So no, he wouldn't know, and it wouldn't have been the reason that he won. If he had won, it would have been because the team had the strategy right, because they had a fast car. You're not going to add that much so that you could overcome lack of skill or lack of horsepower with just a missing bumper cover. Well,
I guess the one other driver I'd like to mention that he's not a rookie, but he is a newcomer this year, was Juan Pablo Montoya. Made his 2014 debut in one of the Penske Fords and ran, I thought, really well. His comments pre-race were interesting about how much the cars had changed since he'd last driven a Cup car, and how little grip the cars seemed to have, and how loose they were. And I thought he handled it really well. There were times during that race when I was thinking, man, he's going to have a top 10. He's that good, but towards the end of the race, they kind of fell back a bit. But impressive run, and I would say JPM is going to be pretty tough at Indianapolis.
Yeah, it could be, and especially he also said that this really all this was a tune-up for Indy.
For Indy.
So if this was a tune-up for Indy, and they had a 18th place finish, then a top 10 is certainly possible.
Well, at the beginning of that race, he got shuffled to the back after one of those first 2 restarts. I think the second restart, he started back around 41st. And, I mean, he rocketed up through the field. He passed a third of the field in the first 2 laps. That car was hooked up, and he knows how to drive it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like him. I'm a little sorry that he's not in the field anymore. Not sure what his best opportunity is. It would be some sort of hybrid between stock cars and open wheel cars. I think he needs that grip for that sense of security to do this every week, but he certainly has the aggressive nature that you need in stock cars. So he's an interesting hybrid.
He also made a couple comments about how not having to worry about the chase would alter his attitude during the race, which makes sense and makes him more dangerous on the racetrack, I think.
Yeah, but really, does anybody? What exactly does that mean? Nobody's worried about points still at this point. At this stage, they will get there, especially those guys that are challenging for what will probably be the only 4 points paying places. But everybody's going for wins right now, which makes it difficult to handicap.
Yeah. Right, that was the Quicken Loans 400 from Michigan International Speedway or Michigan Speedway or MIS, whatever you want to call it. I don't think they know what they want to call it anymore. It was a great weekend. Looking forward to going back there in about what, 7 weeks or so. Should be interesting second time around.
Yeah, one of my favorite. I've got several favorite tracks. Michigan's definitely one of them.
Yeah, it was good. Okay, he's Dan Beaver. You can follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race, and read his Yahoo Fantasy Report at yahoo.com, yahoosports.com. I am Charlie Turney. Follow me on Twitter at OnPitRow. And we'll see you next week for the race recap for the, I guess it's is it the Toyota Save Mart 300? Whatever. I don't know.
Toyota Save Mart 350.
There it is.
Okay.
Toyota Save Mart 350 at Sonoma next Sunday. So talk to you soon. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.